Okay, welcome, Alice. All right. So, um, now, for some of you who may have just arrived, there are some pedals on your seats. This is where we would appreciate if you participated in the conversation in whether you agree or disagree with what we are saying, any of the panelists are saying. So rather than talking to your friend beside you, we want to be part of that conversation, right? And yeah, maybe let's kick things off with a warm-up question, right? So what would you guys say in a few words? What are the biggest wins for DeFi in the last 3 to 4 years? What's worked? What hasn't worked, in your opinion, Rachit?
I think DeFi's gotten a lot faster, with L2s, and I know we'll talk about this in a minute, but if you think about like 4 or 5 years ago when Ethereum was the only ecosystem that had traction, lending was probably the only thing that you could do in DeFi, and that came out of a necessity of like Ethereum price pumping and people wanting to do these sort of borrowing lending activities. As DeFi's evolved, like perps have become one of the biggest use cases of DeFi. I think as we go on, as chains become more faster, we'll have lower latency, we'll see these systems become more efficient. I think DeFi has just become a lot more accessible, a lot more usable. The opportunities available are just immensely higher than they used to be 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Awesome. Mega?
Awesome. I think, in my opinion, my background is actually in corporate law. So, I'm going to say, regulatory oversight is one of the biggest wins in DeFi. Whatever happened in, 2022 actually, really pushed this forward. And I know there are a lot of protocols right now that are really mindful with, how they are conducting their companies and how they are doing the audits and everything. So, I think that's the biggest win for, a lot of retail and institution as well.
Yeah, I agree. Alice, what about you?
I think 3 or 4 years ago, DeFi was mostly used by the crypto native investors, but now we see more people building secure, scalable, and also compliant infrastructure that the traditional finance institutions can use. I think that's the big win and the things that we didn't see 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, 100% agree. Let's talk about the evolution of how DeFi has transformed over the last few cycles, right? Rachit, let's start with you. What would you say is the biggest win, and what is the biggest thing that has just flopped, in your opinion?
I think this is pretty easily verifiable on chain. I talked about how perpetual markets have become immensely huge. Like hyperliquid this cycle. If you think about 3, 4 years ago, the infrastructure that was present then, we couldn't have a hyperliquid type product come out. There's a reason why perps markets exist at a higher volume than options market in crypto, is because the infrastructure around it is a lot better, and we're able to facilitate those type of transactions, which the TradFi world just isn't able to do, which is why they rely on options as the heavier vehicle of investments or hedging, essentially. I think there's only one, the biggest risk or the biggest downturn that DeFi has taken. I'd say Terra Luna is probably one of the darkest days in history. I've personally lost a lot on that as well. Yeah, I think just questioning where the yield is coming from, I think is the biggest question that everyone who's interested in DeFi, understanding the mechanics behind of it and how it actually works is really important. So in terms of wins, perps markets and better, more efficient markets, and then the losses some of these Ponzi adjacent schemes, I'd say have come down a lot, and people are more aware now.
Yeah, Mega, would you agree that, especially coming from a governance standpoint, the consumers really care about where the money is flowing towards, right? Where the staking is coming from, and it's not coming from the next user, it's coming from some sort of yield-bearing treasury activity?
Yeah, I do definitely agree with that. I would say that a lot of sophisticated users nowadays really think okay, if it's a high APR, then it's probably have higher risk as well. And I think that's also part of it is like people understand that now systemic risks really do exist in crypto, especially after, you know, Terra Luna, FTX collab, and then we have the three arrows as well. So in my opinion, I think like people really need to like understand where this is coming from, like in terms of staking, or if it's like restaking and liquid staking as well. Not sure if Alice has.
Yeah, Alice, what about yourself? What do you think?
The big win.
Yes.
So from Hedera's standpoint, our DeFi ecosystem is quite premature because we recently integrated smart contract. But what we see as a big win in our ecosystem, we see real world assets flowing in. So one good example will be IL Finance. They are doing supply chain financing. Apparently, supply chain finance traditionally, they have a lot of inefficiency and liquidity constraint, but they are trying to solve that problem with the DeFi ecosystem, and it works. They onboard the real users from China, like manufacturer. They did a great job there, and then they're trying to expand their businesses. I think that is where we see the big win in how, you know, traditional finances and Web2 in the players they adopting Web3 and DeFi to make their business bigger and better.
And on that note of community adoption, like, would you say the adoption of DeFi has changed over the years from being very grassroots led to be now becoming highly institutionalized?
I do think so. To traditional institutions, they're still very kind of concerned and they don't know how to go about this DeFi, but they're eager to work with, you know, startups who has a very good infrastructures and you know, secure and compliant players to test it out and make them comfortable. And also the startups and the you know, the kind of founders we work with, they are well aware of the traditional finance, their concerns and where they're coming from. So yeah, I think over the time we will see more open up, and I think yeah, gradually it will happen.
Yeah, Rachit, I think you might have a different opinion.
In terms of institutions being at the forefront of DeFi?
In the present context, yes.
No, I actually agree with that. You know, Wormo's actually been working with a lot of institutional partners ourselves. You know, we work with the likes of BlackRock, Apollo Global, Van Eck, Securitize, Janus Henderson. I could go on and on. Yes. Like, they're like 10, 15. I actually think the next wave of DeFi is where we bring these real world opportunities on chain, and then they become interoperable with every ecosystem to a point where, you know, I think in the next 10 years, like my dad holds a lot of mutual funds in India, which is like the main vehicle of investment. Yeah. Well, an Indian dad, I would say. Imagine him using Aave and being able to take a lending position on Aave with his mutual funds. I think that's where the industry is heading. There's a lot more institutional partners, you know, like BlackRock set the stage for everyone now, and everyone feels comfortable with it. I think that's where we're going to. I think another thing that you have to also shout out is stablecoin adoption. You know, in like high inflation countries like Argentina or Turkey. I interact with a lot of people in Argentina where, you know, Argentinians are only able to hold a certain amount of USD. Yeah. And now with stablecoins, they can actually hold a lot more, and they get access to US treasuries. I would say that's also part of DeFi, because the average Argentinian person does not have access to those opportunities, right? So I do think like this institutional involvement will, as I said, like it will bring more opportunities on chain. Yeah. And DeFi is all about opportunity. The infrastructure is there. Now it's about how do we get as many different opportunities on the blockchain and make them as interoperable, as intertwined as possible.
Awesome. Just a quick show of hands from the audience. Do you guys agree that institutions are leading the market, or do you feel like retail could get ahead? What are your thoughts? Quick paddles. Let's go. Don't know. Agree. Yes. Gonna start looking like an auction, yeah? Money. Agree, disagree. Okay. Yeah, the next one, let's talk about, you know, like app chains, alts, L2s, right? Scaling solutions. You know, has the explosion of these app chains, L2s, modular scaling, actually helped make DeFi more secure and more accessible to users? Or, you know, is it just adding additional steps within a process that increases vulnerability, right?
Yeah,
Mega.
I'll take that. I think from like, from my protocol's perspective, because we're on the perps landscape, I think over the past year or 1.5 years, I think the competitive landscape has been like growing so much. And I think one of the problems that come with that is the liquidity fragmentation. There can only be so many protocols, and there can only be so many market makers to like put their capital there. And I think that's a problem because, in a perps, like you need like a big liquidity and everything. But on the other side of that, I think there's like the push from the competition to actually make like a very usable like perp protocol. So you have to actually like make something that is like really highly performant, but also I think in dYdX perspective, we trying to make it like really decentralized and with on par with like the centralized exchanges performance.
Yeah, Alice, do you have anything to add to that? Or Rachit, if you guys have anything to add?
I think appchain and L2 definitely filling the gap that the L1 cannot function. But we are also preparing and try to, adopt and develop the things that the features and the things that the DeFi needs. So eventually, I think we will work together and like converge together. So yeah, I think that's the one.
What about Wormhole? I mean, Wormhole brings together integrations for like 30 plus chains. Like,
Yeah. I actually slightly disagree with Alice. I think we'll see a convergence and every app will try to be their own app chain as infrastructure becomes a lot better. I think this was also like a founding thesis for Wormhole. For everyone's context, Wormhole was actually the first token bridge between Solana and Ethereum. And then, over the course of 5 years, we've built like multiple different products. I think interoperability as a thesis or as a concept where you connect different blockchains. If you go back in human history and you think about all the moments where the human race has evolved, it's always been because of connectivity. Like think about it, the telephone, the railway, the airplane, boats. Every time people have been able to connect more efficiently, our race has always just become a lot more efficient. And if you think about the blockchain world, that's where Wormhole sits, where, there are already thousands of chains. There are going to be more. As dApps get more popular, the popular ones will try to converge into their own app chains, like Uniswap, dYdX, they're Hyperliquid. There's so many different cases. For us, that's a world that we believe in, and that's a world that we're working towards.
cool. So, including a panelist, right? So, would you guys agree or disagree that we are expecting a sort of convergence, right, rather than fragmentations with the L2s and all these other app chains? What do you guys think? Are we expecting a convergence, or is it still going to be highly segregated, like fragmented? Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, cool. So I see some agree. Anybody disagree? We need more identity, more uniqueness. Okay, very cool. Now, I'm going to come to a relatively challenging question for you guys, right? So let's talk a little bit about liquid restaking or restaking, like liquid restaking tokens and restaking. That's something that's been quite relevant in the last year. And they were supposedly the next big thing in unlocking liquidity, right? A lot of entities raised a lot of money with restaking features. Now, what are your thoughts? Whether it was a success, a failure, are we still going to see restaking as a trend? Or are we looking at something else? Rachit, you want to start?
That's a really tough question. Personally, I was also involved in the restaking meta, and I was also heavily leveraged on Pendle, Gearbox, whatever you want to say. I fortunately did not lose money. I know a lot of people who did lose money. I think restaking in terms of the economic security model that EigenLayer proposed and that everyone else is building towards makes sense. I know a lot of ecosystem teams that still value that, and they work with Avail, Celestia, all the other DA providers. In terms of the DeFi aspect of restaking, I think that's come down. If you look at all the protocols that we're building towards it, like EtherFi, for instance, their highest used product is now their card. A lot less focus on the restaking stuff, and that's evident with their marketing as well. I think the restaking DeFi flywheel, where Gearbox, Pendle, you had all these sort of crazy looping mechanisms, that's come down, and investor interest has also come down. But I still believe in the economic security model that restaking proposed. I'll raise you the question. I think restaking last year is what BATs are this year. That's institutional restaking, if you want to say.
Yeah, I think with institutions coming in with a lot more liquidity, while things are being staked, right? Money is still working, even though it's working. So I think we are quite slave drivers. Now that may come as a regulatory or a systemic risk. And Mega, what do you think about this whole restaking thing?
Yeah, I personally think it's phasing out a little bit, and also people realize that this could be dangerous, especially first we have also the slashing risk that is really big, and the penalty could also be pretty bad for retail. So in terms of the biggest risk, I think it's still the systemic aspect of it and how it will make the whole system collapse, and we don't want to see that again as we go down the bull market. We don't want the systemic risk to end the bull market again. It would much preferable to end it on something else.
Yeah, Alice, what about Hedera?
I would say that restaking. I agree with Mega. Yeah. To be fair, we actually, as Hedera, we see different kind of yield opportunity from our side, especially on the ESG green assets. So people, every city is a good example. They're bringing green finance and DApp strategy to the ecosystem so that the people can expose to the new yield and generating opportunity. I think it might be safer and stable to play with those kind of assets rather than restaking it. And I don't know. I'm a little bit cautious, but yeah.
Yeah. So anybody in the audience here actively doing restaking that has not been liquidated yet? Yeah, I mean, again, it's where the institution in DeFi wins, right? And the rest of us retailers get wrecked. Sorry, I hope I didn't say anything too offensive, sir. Yeah, cool. Now let's talk about what are sophisticated DeFi plays that are relevant today, in your opinion? Right, maybe Alice, you want to start, right? You just mentioned you guys were doing something maybe pertaining to green finance, refi.
Yes, that's correct. So sophisticated players and builders, they are definitely looking at bigger picture, looking at where the traditional finance institutions moving and what kind of infrastructure they're looking for. So they're focusing on how they can build again secure, scalable, and compliant infrastructure. And we see a good example from the DeFi or RWA project. They want to wrap tokenize an MMF from BlackRock or Franklin Templeton to deploy in DeFi so that the DeFi users and retail users can access to the assets that they never able to do that. I think those kind of smart and sophisticated players are looking at those type of access and area.
Cool. Meg, what about you? Any alphas, perhaps maybe more from a regulatory side? What are signals that you're looking for that indicates a specific DeFi asset or project is less risk adverse?
Right now, I think it's quite hard to say. When I think of sophisticated players, it's either this terminally online, 22-year-old, or someone from TradFi who has very a good system on finding a good alpha. And I think for me personally, I am neither of those. So I would say I think real world asset and tokenization is something that I'm really excited about right now. Another one is Deepen, which is also like in some ways also like RWA. So yeah, I think that's all.
So like a digital kind of project, something that has tangibility, something you can actually touch and feel, not completely
Yeah, and also
abstract.
I would say those are useful for, I can't say from like, first world perspective, but I'm from Indonesia and I think like any kind of like innovation that helps like people from like my country to like develop this will be like, really big because most of the world is not there yet, in terms of
Awesome.
development.
Rachit, what about you? Like, I mean, are you looking at specific metrics or indicators of what DeFi protocols you guys might want to connect to?
For sure. I actually want to answer this on a personal basis, like, non-financial advice. So I'm very happy they have it written down. If you actually look on-chain, and you can verify everything I say on-chain, the most looped DeFi play in all of DeFi is like stake deep to ETH on Aave. So I think if you're a sophisticated investor that's looking to leverage up, that's probably the highest opportunity that you can do. The second thing that a lot of people have been doing and has a lot of volume on chain is people are taking borrowed positions against their WBTC. So a lot of the sophisticated investors are just buying and holding Ethereum, but then people who are on chain are able to lever up with whatever risk tolerance they have. The stablecoin meta is obviously around, and if you want to play around with TVL opportunities there where you dedicate TVL towards a stablecoin project and you get yield and you get airdrop opportunities, obviously that's something that's going to be really huge this cycle. I've gotten really into Hyperliquid and I've been staking a lot of hype as well from a personal perspective, and I've been sort of playing around with their flywheel. I think that's really interesting. But I think if you're a sophisticated investor who is looking to do something that everyone does, it comes back to just taking lending and borrowing positions on Aave against your Ethereum or your wrapped Bitcoin.
So what sort of yield are you happy with? Like, what's a good percentage of yield that you are looking for in a DeFi?
But I always target for my positions for like 9 or 10%. That's usually a lever of 3 loops on Aave, usually. One thing that I'll add, like I really got into the Pendle cycle from the restaking stuff. So whenever Pendle has, like they're doing a lot of stuff with the institutional stuff and stablecoin stuff right now, I'm always very interested in that. And like that's a game that I will play because I understand it and I enjoy it as like a DeFi geek. But for me, at my corpus, like 9%, 10% is a lot on my crypto side. Yeah.
So Rachit is what we would call a sophisticated investor, and I would be happy with my 4.5%. Thank you very much. So while we have the last 2 minutes, maybe just a quick fire round. What's your alpha that that you are looking at the market at the moment in terms of DeFi? And is it whether it be a yield product, staking, or anything interesting? What's your alpha? Let's start with Alice.
RWAs and green finance.
Clean finance and RWAs. Okay.
dYdX. Perps, yeah, definitely. if you want to trade anything, because perps is like you can just like get an oracle with a price point and you can like long or short your asset without actually like owning the asset. I think that's a good way for like retail to like come in, or institution even. So yeah.
I think there are a lot of arbitrage opportunities in DeFi. Like you need to be really on chain and you need to understand where the money flows and how like price oracles and how sophisticated these systems work. I think if you play with size, you can find a lot of arbitrage opportunities on chain. In terms of projects, one project that's been making headlines is Neutral. They're essentially a stablecoin that takes a delta hedged OTC position. They recently hit 50 million. I'm looking into that honestly as like a personal capacity. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. So that's all the time we have, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. We will have a breakout session if you want more alphas from either the panelists or myself. We hopefully won't show you anything too dodgy. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the festival. Cheers.